Some of these gummies are not very chewy. They're kind of stiff.
Well, that's what happens when they expire, bub.
Ah.
Howdy, Roundabout, and welcome back to a brand new special, another episode of Al Pacino's Prison Scene. Hey, sidebar, don't listen
Everyone
to
is
this.
special.
Did you pull up the email?
Yeah.
Okay, good. You didn't hear that? Welcome back again, whatever I just said. This is Al Pacino's Prison Scene, the podcast where we look at movies that objectively have no deeper meaning, and we are your two hosts. My name is Thomas, and with me is my co-host, Jake.
Ooga chaka, ooga, ooga, ooga.
That is not from this movie. As a matter of fact, there are only 4 songs in this movie, including the one that plays during the credits.
Oh, but there's one that's fantastic. And Jared, you know exactly which one I'm talking about.
Well, one of these songs I have saved on Spotify, but it's probably not the one you're talking about.
Are you sure?
I don't know, maybe.
Is it the montage one?
Yeah.
That's the one.
But I don't know if I had this saved
That's the one, Jared.
On my thing from this movie or if it was there unrelated to this movie.
I also don't know.
But
I'm pretty sure it was this movie.
So you read the title. You know what we're talking about. We're talking about Velocipastor. And most of you, even though you read the title, you know what you're talking about. You probably don't know what we're talking about. But this movie is only an hour and 10 minutes. I already told you. I brushed my teeth. This movie is only an hour and 10 minutes long. So if you haven't seen it and you have Amazon Prime, pause this podcast, watch the movie.
Or Tubi or Vudu.
And hop back in. Well, I just know it's on Prime. But I guess those others would be free.
Yeah. With ads, of course.
Yeah, but we don't like ads.
Oh no, my gummy.
Ads are gross. Ads aren't real. We're not the ads for not. Anyways, I was prepared. Actually,
Always
you can read the
been.
email if you want to.
Well, I mean, the email, there's no email. It's literally from our boy Jared Donald. Shout out Jared Donald. The subject is Velocipastor, and the body of the text just says Carol.
Carol! 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 There is no Carol in HR!
But
that's not from this movie.
If you know who Carol is, then that's all you need to put.
But that is another meme if you want to make a meme template.
Shout out Joey Butler.
Yeah, Mr. Louis C.K. himself. He did the Despicable Meme Challenge. I know this episode comes out a little bit a while after that. But if you didn't do it, you're not a real fan. So thanks, Mr. Dad.
We're looking at you, Hayden and Sam.
Anyways,
and Mom.
I have not looked at the calendar, but I'm pretty sure this episode comes out almost exactly a month after our episode on Daredevil, which feels pretty fitting, honestly.
All this stuff is on the calendar, so I can't look at it.
But I was planning on saying at the beginning of this episode, at the top of this episode, where we are currently in the episode, I was planning on saying, I'm glad to finally have a movie that had no meaning, and like that's what we're here for or whatever. But then I watched the movie and I'm like, gosh darn it, this might be the most meaningless movie we've ever talked about on this episode.
I know. Look how much notes I wrote. I almost wrote a full page, which is too unhair for Hernstov.
Yes.
Unbeknownst to thine.
I don't know what you just said, but yeah.
It was old English. You wouldn't understand.
And then honestly, as I was watching it, I was like, I have no idea how I'm going to recap this.
Well, so originally when I watched it with Jared, shout out Jared. Thank you for showing me this. I know we'd make fun, but yes, I appreciate it. The first time I watched it, I was already like, yo, this movie's great. But this time, I was like, yo, this movie is fantastic. Because it really is.
And I think it's easy to like point out and be like, haha, movie bad. But if you watched it, if you have watched it, if you've seen it, you like watching it, all the bad things feel intentional.
They do. So. And think about the budget for this film was $35,000, which I bet you listeners couldn't make a movie as good as this with $35,000. But also think about if it had like a real budget,
it wouldn't be as good. I don't think. There's a lot of charm in the.
This is true. I'm conflicted about this because I do want to see a shot-for-shot remake of this.
Well, I feel like with more budget, it becomes something like Kung Fury, which is phenomenal in its own right, but it's also like its own different animal. I feel like
that's true, but I would still like to see it. I would like to see what else it could be.
But anyways, recap. All right, Mr. Priestman is in the church, and he's like, "You better read the book of Job because we're all Job." And then he walks outside. He's like, "Hey, Mom. Hey, Dad." And then their car blows up, and he's like, "Not my mom and dad." And it cuts back to the car, and it says VFX car explosion. And
the dad wave.
That is under 2 minutes in the movie, and that's how it starts. That's how the good men turn cruel, or whatever that quote is. Anyways, then he's like, "Oh man, my parents are dead." And then the other priest guy says, word for word, this is a quote from the movie. This is what he says. He says, "That's what parents do. Parents die." Something like that. That's almost word for word what he says.
No, I'm pretty sure that is word for word.
That's what parents do. They just die on you. And then that priest is like, "You need to go somewhere where God will never find you." So, of course, Mr. Preacher Man, Doug, he goes to China because everyone knows God's not in China.
Right.
Which is the start of many problematic, pretty, I would say, overtly racist sentiments in this film. But we'll talk about that.
It's the budget.
We'll talk about that a little later. So he goes to China, and then this girl's running away from this guy, and she gets shot in the leg.
Frankie Mermaid.
And she's holding...
Oh, wait, no, that's later. That's later.
This is in China. That's in America. This girl's running away from this dude, and the girl's holding like a velociraptor tooth. And she tells the preacher man, Doug, to do something with it. And he's like, "You want me to take it?" And she's like, "No, destroy it." But she says it in Chinese, so he can't understand her. So he takes it and then runs into a tree and cuts himself with it. And he's like, oh. And then he comes back to America. And then the other preacher's like, "You having that dream again?" And he's like, "Yeah, the same dream I always have." And then somewhere else, I'm going to say we're in New York City, even though we're probably not. Somewhere else in New York City, there's a girl who's a hooker, and she's like,
Carol.
Yeah, her name is Carol. And she's like walking past a homeless man that the preacher man just walked past. The preacher man was like, "I can't give you any money. I don't got any money." But then Carol's like, "Here's some money. I'll give you some money, homeless man. I'm a hooker." And so she does that. And then Frankie Mermaid's like, "Hey, bitch, give me my money. If you, again, this is a quote from the movie. He says, If you could stuff as many dicks in that mouth as you do a sandwich, I'd have a ton of money." And that's what Frankie Mermaid says. And then that night, hooker lady's getting mugged by a dude. The dude's like, "Give me your money." And she's like, "I don't got any money." And then Velocipastor is a velociraptor, and he's like, "Bah!" And then so the next morning, Velocipastor is just the pastor now. He's just Doug again. And he wakes up in Carol's bed, and Carol's like, "Last night was interesting." And he's like, "Oh, was it your first time too?" And she was like, "Yeah." "Wait, what are you talking about?" And then he's like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "When you turned into a velociraptor and ate that dude." And he's like, "That didn't happen." And then she shows him the body, and he's like, "Wow, that did happen. I got to run away and do confessions now." Frankie Mermaid's like, "Hey, I'm in the confessions booth. I'm smoking a cigarette because I do whatever I want."
Padre.
Also, the other day, I blew up this kid's parents, and then the preacher went out and was like, "Mom, Dad!" Oh, that was really funny. And then Velocipastor's like, "You killed my parents?" And so his hand turns into a velociraptor claw, and he reaches through the confession booth, and he rips out his throat thing. I want to say thorax, but I know that's not the right term. Anyways, he kills him. And then he goes to Carol, and he's like, "I killed Frankie Mermaid." She's like, "Yeah!" And then they become friends for a bit. I think there's a montage. I don't really remember.
Bro, but then, there is a montage.
Yeah, but not that montage.
Not that montage.
Then later, and then right after that, the other priest is like, "Hey, don't hang out with hookers." And then Doug is like, "No." And then the other preacher's like, "Well, I'm going to lock you in this room."
He's reading a book called Crime 2. And then Father Stewart comes in, and he takes a Bible. Doug takes a Bible and like puts it over Crime 2. But it's like this. He does this. You can't see what I'm doing, audience. But he does this. And you can obviously tell that he's reading another book.
I thought he was reading a book about dinosaurs because I forgot to mention in one of the conversations that Doug, the Velocipastor, and Carol, the hooker, have is Doug says, I don't know anything about dinosaurs. And then she says, well, I don't know anything about the Bible. So he's got to learn about dinosaurs so he can be a good Velocipastor. Anyways, Father Stewart locks Doug in the room and is like, don't you leave, Doug. Okay, now we're going to leave and go see the witch doctor guy. And so they're like, oh, hey, witch doctor guy. And then Father Stewart's like, man, I haven't seen this guy since the war. And then we have this really weird flashback to Father Stewart in the war, except it's the same old man, except now he's wearing a wig. And this guy in the war is like, man, you better name your son after me, the guy who never died in the war. And then that guy dies. And then Father Stewart's like, ah! And then Father Stewart's like, at least I can go back to Annabelle or whatever her name is. And then Annabelle comes running through the woods, and he's like, Annabelle, what are you doing here? And then she steps on a mine and blows up. And then everyone else is like, those darn Viet Cong. And then it comes back to present day. And that wasn't relevant to anything, but it was in the movie. And then the alley, the witch doctor guy is like, oh, man, you're feeling weird. And then Doug his hands turns into Velociraptor again. So then he rips out Father Stewart's eyes and kills Allie, I think. And then he's like, man, I killed Father Stewart. How can I do this? And then he goes to Carol, and he's like, Carol, I did a bad thing. I shouldn't have done this. And that's when the montage and the I didn't even have time to think song comes on.
No, I didn't even have time to think. I didn't even have time to put my shoes on.
All right, that's enough of that. And then they apparently, not beknownst to us, but it looks like they did the dirty. Uh-oh. That means he can't be a preacher man no more or something. I don't know the rules of Catholics.
Well, I'm pretty sure he already wasn't when he murdered a few people.
Just when you do the sex.
When
you popped out of her. Anyways. And then at some point, beep, he's conflicted. I think this is before the montage, but I don't remember where it falls exactly. At some point, Doug is conflicted. He's like, man, I used to have parents. What would my parents say if they were here right now?
And then there's an Uncle Ben scene.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I did not know what you were talking about. But yes, from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy. But before that, they're all like, him, his mom, and his dad are sitting at a table, and they're like,
you're my only son.
No, not yet.
Oh.
That's not at the table. And then they're in the car, and he's like, I'm about to go to preacher school. And the dad's like, well, you're my only son, and I love you, and you better go to preacher school. But remember, if you ever stop listening to God, you better just listen to your heart, man. And then Doug's like, okay, and he gets out of the car. But yeah, it does. There's like white light everywhere, so it looks like everyone's dead. But they're not dead. Not yet. Or maybe they are. I don't know. Anyways, so the sex montage happens, and then like a bunch of ninjas jump in the room, and they're like, Carol and Doug are. And then one dude's like, you'll never find the dude that was in charge of us. And then he dies. And then they go and find the dude. And
wait,
then
did you talk about Father Stewart getting his eye picked out?
Yes, I did.
Oh, I forgot.
And then they have a voiceover. It's like, boy, are we glad that ninja guy told us where to go before he died. And so they go to that place. It turns out, Father Stewart's not dead. He just has an eye patch now. And the Asian guy took him, and he's like, this is my church where I sell cocaine to get people to come to church.
Artemimus Academy.
Yeah. And then there's this other guy there who's white. And he laughs like, oh, whenever the other guy has his evil laugh. And then Velocipastor shows up. And he's not Velocipastor yet. He's still Doug. It's just Doug and Carol. And then I'm pretty sure Doug sees the Asian guy kill Father Stewart. And then he's like, no! And then he does a bunch of karate to all the other guys. And then
the white guy.
And then the white guy's like, you remember me, Doug? And Doug looks at him and he goes, I'm your brother. And Doug's like, what? And then it shows a flashback. The whole time the brother was in the scenes, the kitchen scene where they're
like the Puss in Boots Humpty scene.
Oh, yeah. And the scene where they're like, ha 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 ha, that scene, he's just in the kitchen staring at him, the brother is. And then in the car scene when the dad's like, you're my only son, Doug. And once Doug gets out of the car, the brother was laying down in the back and he sits up and you can see his head. So he was there the whole time, but obviously his family didn't love him. And so Doug kills him. I think he tried to kill Doug first. No, actually what happens is the brother's like, I don't want to soil the sword of my ancestors with your blood. And he throws it into the ground. But then Doug does like Thor magic and like the sword comes to his hand. He goes, your ancestors are my ancestors. And then he kills Sam. I think that was the brother's name. I don't know why I didn't say it before. But he kills Sam. And then he does some ninja moves. And Carol's doing ninja moves. But then Carol gets sliced up with some kind of ninja sword. And then Doug is like, no, Carol! And all the other ninjas are just kind of standing there watching awkwardly.
Well, they're actually like sad. They're like,
yeah, one of them's getting comforted. I'm pretty sure it's the one that killed Carol. And then he's like, you'll pay for this. Doug is, and then he turns into the true Velocipastor in his final form,
in all its
and
glory,
kills all of those guys. And then the head Asian guy comes out,
Wei Chan,
and he shoots him. He shoots an arrow. He's like, I shot you with the anti-venom.
It's more like, oh, I shot you with the anti-venom.
He shot him with the anti-venom or whatever, the antidote. And then Doug's like, I think my hand's immune. And then he rips Asian dude's head off. And then he was like,
No, you forgot about the.
That was implied.
And then he flips it and then he goes, and then drops it.
And then it cuts to him in the doctor's office, and the doctor comes in, and the doctor thing falls in front of the doctor's eyes for a moment, so he can't see. So then he has to lift it back up, and that's very important, so I had to be told here. And then the doctor picks up an ashtray and takes a cigarette out of the ashtray and then lights the cigarette and puts it in his mouth and starts smoking it. And then he's like, Carol's going to be okay. As a matter of fact, I think she's okay right now.
It's like a pediatric office.
Yeah. And then Doug walks in. He's like, Carol, are you fine? She goes, I'm fine. He's like, are you fine? And she whispers in his ear. She goes, I'm fine. And then words come on screen and it says, she's fine. And then something else happens immediately after that, but I don't remember.
Well, they're like outside.
They're like, the church won't die. They're going to go to other places. And he's like, yeah, like China, Europe maybe. I guess I got to be Velocipastor across the world. And then the CSI theme goes, yeah! It doesn't really, but it should have. And that's the end of the movie. And that's probably the longest. To me, that feels like the longest recap that we've had on the show. Maybe that's correct. Maybe it's not. Only time will tell. Anyways.
All I'm saying is I'm here for a sequel. Yo, you know who should do the sequel? Did you read that article I sent you about Face Off 2?
Yes.
That's who should direct.
The guy that's directing Face Off 2?
Yes.
He also directed Godzilla vs. Kong.
And he's also doing a Thundercats movie.
Yes. He's also from Alabama. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
I gotcha. All right,
what's his name?
Adam Wingard.
Adam Wingard. Al Pacino's Prison Scene Podcast. If you need crew, we're here.
All right.
Also, please do Velocipastor 2.
I think the guy that did Velocipastor 1 is the only guy who can do Velocipastor 2. He's the only one that can handle the velocity.
Are you Edgar writing this?
I don't know.
Edgar Wright is to Scott Pilgrim?
I don't know what you mean. I don't know what
was it you said that?
I don't know.
That was like only Edgar Wright could direct Scott Pilgrim?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I'm saying.
Yes. Anyways, so what I think this movie is about is two things that are the same thing but the opposite thing. Okay? Are you ready? It is. I wrote it down. Where is it?
Always
it is the ultimate deconstruction of the Christian faith, but also the opposite of that sentence. It's that too.
Okay, I agree with you, but also I was putting it in. I was not reading like that into it, like in a. I want to say general, but it's not general. But it's like more broad, kind of.
Well, initially, where I was coming from, because obviously I've seen this before. That's the rule. And finally, we got a movie that I didn't break the rule for. I think we did last time. I don't remember.
What was last time?
I don't know. Well, no, last one was Willy Wonka, so definitely not. Definitely
Before
not.
that was Sleepaway Camp.
No, before that was Boss Baby.
Before that was
Sleepaway Camp. We broke the rule. Anyways, back to the regularly scheduled program. That's from Batman.
I said that this was just a modern retelling of Job.
Well, he mentions Job at the beginning.
He does.
And I don't know anything about Job.
All
except for that one time VeggieTales did Job.
Do you want to? I can get a guest on the podcast here right quick and tell you about Job.
Is it going to be God?
No.
Okay.
It's Kyle.
No, not a real guest. We can't have real guests. We can only have made up guests.
Okay, it's God then.
Like York.
It's God then.
No.
Okay.
I thought you were going to be God for a second.
I can. Well, who?
Anyways,
yeah.
I mean, he said something about suffering or whatever. Is Job is
well? Okay, so the very first thing that he says, he talks about Job, but then there's a Bible verse on the thingy. The thingy, you know what I'm talking about?
Nope.
Behind the lectern.
Nope. Like a whiteboard.
It was like the poster board thing that had like James 5 or whatever. James.
But Job is a book in itself, correct?
Yes, but it's referred to later in the Bible. I'm going to read it to you right quick. It's James chapter 5 verse 10 and 11. I'm reading from the King James version, so for all you small brain people, you may not understand. He says,
just like the dinosaurs, huh?
Yeah, I'm Bullseye.
Huh?
I'm Bullseye. All right, verse 10. Take my brethren, the prophets, who have spoken in the name of the Lord, for an example of suffering, affliction, and of patience. Behold, we count them happy which endure. Ye have heard of the patience of Job, and have seen the end of the Lord, that the Lord is very pitiful and of tender mercy.
So what does that mean?
It's just saying, like, remember Job, essentially,
okay.
and then the suffering that he went through, and how his faith persevered.
Perseverance.
Yes.
Which
I think the biggest plot point of this film that speaks to the meaning, at least on my end, is Father Stewart's flashback
to the war,
and then like the end right there at the end with Sam and Carol.
How?
So what I think it's just basically how so Job is about faith persevering, and Job decides to continue believing in God, or rather God's plan.
By Drake?
Yes. Instead of being like, bro, what the heck are you doing? Which he does confront God. He's like, bro, what the heck are you doing? And God's like, bro, chill out.
Are you talking about Job or Velocipastor?
Job.
Okay.
And God's like, bro, chill out. I got this. Just chill. And Job's like, fine. And so in this, so Job chooses to persevere, even though of his suffering, because he lost everything. Like straight
his
up.
Job, spelled Job.
Yes. He lost his family. He lost everything he owned. He got like a bunch of boils all over his body. But he just persevered. And so Father Stewart lost his Ollie and lost his wife or love or whatever within who knows how quickly, but plot wise within like a minute. And then the same thing happens to Doug. Doug loses his brother. Now we don't know what their relationship was like. We can assume not close, but still.
Well, it seems like Doug forgot he had a brother. So
symbolically his brother and then his love also. But I think it goes in more when we talk about what the Velocipastor is. So I think that the Velocipastor kills those who are bad. And because of Father Stewart's suffering, he, although superficially didn't turn away from God, he did on a deeper level turn away from God. That's why he died, because he was bad. And then Doug, instead of succumbing to his suffering, chose to persevere and have faith and still do the good thing, the right thing.
What was the right thing?
Kill the bad people.
See, but
which we'll get into in our discussion about dismantling the Christian faith.
Because isn't that one of the 10 Commandments, as thou shalt not kill?
Well, it is. And so Carol brings up the point. She's like, but if you're killing bad people, then it's okay.
Yeah, but God loves everybody. Which
This is true. This
okay,
is true.
so the foundation for what I said, like the contradictory, like deconstruction and uplifting of the thing, started when right after Doug's parents were killed, and he said, "Why would God do this?" And then Father Reclamation, whatever his name is, the other guy, Father Stewart, that's what it is. Speaking of Father Reclamation, actually,
isn't that a band
Doug,
or something?
Huh? That's a movie.
Okay.
Doug looks like Ethan Hawke and John Mulaney had a baby.
Okay, so I think he looks like the Walmart version of what's his name? Agent Smith. Hugo Weaving.
Oh, interesting.
Hugo
I would
Weaving.
never have thought of that.
Now, but do you see it?
Kinda.
Yeah.
But anyways, and then right after that question, Father Stewart says something like, "He has a plan for us all, and everything happens for a reason." I just forgot why I was saying that. Oh, because then it's like, well, then why did the bad things happen or whatever? Because if I'm good, then God should be rewarding me for doing good stuff, right? But then also there's the thing where, like in the Bible, and I guess I'm not like super versed or whatever, but in the Bible, Jesus would hang out with like the sinners and the prostitutes and all those people. But then nowadays people are like, God, don't hang out with the bad people. And then like in this, when Doug's around with the hooker, Father Reclamation is like, don't do that. And then thirdly, her whole thing, like you were saying, it's originally Carol's idea to kill the bad people because some people just are like too bad to be on Earth or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever she says. And then I wrote down, I couldn't remember her name at this point. So
Carol?
I wrote down, the hooker posits righteous murder, but the primary point of Christianity is forgiveness. Only God can judge and issue punishment. And so that's where I think the deviation from Christianity as a whole comes in.
Yeah. So I agree with all the points you make here. I don't want to further back the dismantling of the Christian faith presented here. So Father Stewart is supposed to be this quote unquote all good guy. Like he is the symbol for the Catholic Church in this film, undoubtedly. But he also does some very questionable things. And I think most importantly, he goes to Ali, who is like a fortune teller, I guess. Some sort of
he does exorcisms.
Pagan magic.
That's why he came in.
But it's not like a Christian Catholic exorcism. It's something else. I don't know exactly what, but it's something else. It's not a righteous exorcism. But Father Stewart says sometimes to get rid of the evil, you have to... did I write it down?
I did.
Oh, he says, Doug's like, where are we going? And Stewart says, somewhere the church forgot. And then he says, like, we have to choose the necessary evil. What does he say?
We need evil to fight evil.
Right. So, but it's interesting. Why does Stewart get to decide when evil is necessary?
Right. Well, and then even in response to that, Doug says, well, that's literally what I was just saying. And then he's like, no. And then that's just the end of the conversation. So I wrote down that quote, and then I wrote down hypocrisy of the church, ?
Well, let's take a look at Luther and all of that with the original breaking off from the Catholic Church.
I don't know what you're talking about.
The 95 Theses.
Martin Luther?
Yeah. 95 Theses in the Book of Worms and stuff. Basically, the Catholic Church was like, in a very political sense, we don't like what you're saying, and we're going to shut you down because of that. And then Luther was like, actually, and there was like bang bang, and then 95 Theses. So I think the same idea is presented here.
Yeah. Well, and then what I think is most interesting is later on, this philosophy, we need evil to fight the evil, is then kind of thrown back in his face when he's in the camp of
Artemimus.
Yeah.
I want a pee-pee.
Yeah, right.
Shout out $10 if you know what that is.
That guy, the head of the Wu-Tang Clan, whatever his name is. Sorry, that was probably I shouldn't have said that.
Wei Chan,
the
guy who goes, is extremely racist and hashtag stop Asian hate. Extremely racist, like tone voice. He says like, what does he say? I need a line that he says.
I don't know. Well, he doesn't speak English for most of it, so I don't.
But remember. He's like, you are not the Velocipastor. It's like Yoda.
I did not read that. But anyways, that guy talks about how he's going to be selling cocaine, and he's like supposed to be supporting the gospel or whatever. So Father Reclamation is like, what? How does that have to do with doing the God stuff? And he's like, well, you see, when we give the cocaine to the people, then they seek help, and they seek help at Christian places, and then we can convert them to be our followers there. So like that's the same mentality of evil fighting the evil that he was purporting earlier in the film, but then now, since it's not serving him, he's against it.
Okay, so do you know what an indulgence is in the Catholic Church?
No. I don't know anything about Catholicism except for like it's extreme. I'm doing the little surfer hang ten thing. It's like extreme Christianity.
So indulgences were basically you would pay an indulgence to get a loved one out of purgatory. Which, if you think about that for a second, doesn't totally make sense on a fundamental level. But basically, the church was manipulating people to pay indulgences so that they could make money. And so I think it's possible that that is a little analogous here, is that Wei Chan and the Artemimus or whatever is getting people addicted to cocaine and then selling them treatment or rehabilitation.
Right.
Which I think can kind of be related to the idea of an indulgence. I just thought that was interesting.
I mean, yeah, I don't know anything about that, so I'm not going to add on or retract from that. But I do think that them being Catholic is fundamentally important to this movie, in contrast to any other
denomination.
Or religion in general. Like the fact that they're Christian and the fact that they're Catholic Christians is important. Number one, because it was filmed at a Methodist church. Yet they are still Catholic. Well, at some point in the background, you can see the Methodist Church logo, and I grew up in the Methodist Church.
Oh, okay.
So I was like, hey.
You talking about the P and the X?
No, it's a cross. It's the flaming cross.
Oh.
And then at the end of the credits, it's like, filmed at Methodist Church, Steinberg, Pennsylvania.
Judged by an all-Christian jury.
Oh, yeah. I don't think that's actually true, but I like the joke. Anyways, I think the fact that they're Catholic really was important for the film, and I think the guy that wrote the movie knows his Bible. Number one, for like the Job stuff earlier, and then the symbolism with the brothers, because all throughout the Bible, and I have two examples written down. All throughout the Bible, there's like this repeating theme of like troubled brothers or brothers that didn't get along. Obviously, initially you have Cain and Abel, one of whom kills the other one in a field.
All right, give me a second.
Do you remember who killed who?
Yes, Thomas.
Who killed who?
Cain killed Abel.
Okay. Because he
was jealous.
Right, because Abel had all the junk and Cain wanted the junk. But actually...
Well, okay.
What?
He
did. He had all the junk and he wanted the junk. But the first brothers that I thought of...
And Cain said unto the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Wait, where does he say? Oh, hold on.
Quit reading the Bible, bro. This is not the Bible podcast.
Hold on. This is Genesis 4, verse 9. And the Lord said unto Cain, where is Abel thy brother? And Cain said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? This is the first reference of brotherhood in the Bible.
Okay.
As far as I know.
Anyways, the first thing that I thought of...
There's also Jacob and Esau.
That's what I'm going to say! The first thing that I thought of with Sam and Doug was Jacob and Esau. Because that's a myth. I almost said myth, which would have made a lot of people upset. But then I said it anyway. So sorry, people that are going to be mad at that.
But you prefaced it. So
anyways, okay. What?
You prefaced it, so it's okay.
We're at ramen noodles. Anyways, Jacob and Esau is a part of the Bible.
Has been.
It's a part of the Bible that has stuck with me forever. because Esau is very hairy. And I just remember that. I remember that because of the fact that he was very hairy. That really stuck with me.
What about Mishaw, Shishaw, and Abednego?
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I also know that because
that's what I say. Shishaw, Mishaw, and Abednego.
I know that because of VeggieTales. I don't know what they did or what the relevance
Chocolate
is.
Bunny.
But I remember that from VeggieTales. Anyways, Jacob and Esau. So what the story of that is like Esau's the big burly brother. He's like, brah, I'm going to get all this job and get all this stuff.
The firstborn.
Yes.
That's important.
And then Jacob's a scrawner, youngy brother. And he's like, shucks, I'm in the shadow of this brother my whole life. But the difference between this story and Velocipastor is that Jacob eventually usurps Esau because he has cunning and intelligence. And Esau's just a brute.
Well, so yes, but I think a better one for this possibly might be the prodigal son. Do you know that one?
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, basically the younger brother, it's like two brothers. There's the older brother and the younger brother. The younger brother's like, the dad's like, hey, you're pretty much dead already. Just give me my money. So the older father's like, okay, but don't ever come back. And the younger brother goes out, spends all his money on Jezebels, and then has to work for Pig Slop. And then he eats the Pig Slop because he's broke. And then he finally goes home, and the older brother's like, Pshaw, what are you doing here, loser? And the dad's like, my son is home. Oh no, what's the movie? Madagascar 2. My son has returned.
It's actually Madagascar Escape to Africa, but anyways.
And then the older brother's like, oh, what the heck, Dad? And the dad's like, I love my son.
And how is that better for this story?
Because Sam has been neglected. And
yeah, but he doesn't get loved. He get killed.
Doug is not neglected.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's the same as Jacob and Esau. Anyways,
I just wanted to flex a little bit.
The point of that is just that Bibles is brothers and brothers is Bible. So this movie is Bible.
Well, there's our title.
Anyways.
Bibles is brothers.
Anyways. I don't know where I was going before that.
Or you're talking about Sam and
well, yeah, I know that.
Raimi.
And then like brothers and stuff. Oh, I was just saying he knows his Bible.
Adi Shankar, or whatever his name is. Alibaba? What's his name?
I don't know. Anyways, I do have a question about the war scene. Because when I was watching it, I was like, I feel like that this didn't happen. Because, number one, you could argue the production stuff. Hold on. Better out than in. You could argue the production stuff, but that's riddled throughout the film. So I don't think that means that it's not true. But the fact that he says that he knew Ollie, he hasn't seen Ollie since the war. And then that guy he's talking to, his name is Alistair. So, like, potentially that guy is Ollie, but obviously Ollie's not dead. So then I think the argument could be made that scene is just like a figment of of Father Stewart's imagination for some reason. But then I decided that it did actually happen because he mentions that he says something along the lines of, those wounds are why I am.
He says that's exactly what it says. But that's why I was talking about in the beginning of this episode how Doug perseveres and still manages to be a quote unquote good person, whereas Father Stewart doesn't. Now he is a clergyman, so supposedly he is good, which is why I think it sets up the idea of the dismantling or the deconstruction of the Christian faith. Did I interrupt you? I'm sorry.
So what I was going to say was that this goes back to the question of why does God deliver tragedy upon good men? And then there's the argument that that Father Reclamation said at the beginning when he's like, I almost said the Batman v Superman quote again.
Well, he says what he does say. It's a weird scene. They're both sitting there, so it's right after his parents get blowed up.
Yep.
And they're sitting on a pew, and it's a wide, but then overlaid, and they're in the middle of the frame, and then overlaid to the left and the right is like a close-up with some weird lighting, also talking.
Yep.
But, again, this is Job. Father Stewart says it's not our place to ask.
Okay. But what I was going to say, he says, is probably what you said. I don't know. Hold on. Oh, he has a plan for all of us.
Right.
Which I said earlier. And so, obviously, like, tragedy comes with the good. And so the tragedies in this film are what lead these men down their righteous path. Now, I think I don't really want to get into this discussion, but I think we could get into the discussion of what does it mean to be righteous? Because arguably murder is not cool, man.
Well, look at the Crusades.
Well,
look at Templars. I mean, those were righteous wars, right? But they
allegedly,
well, exactly,
historically,
allegedly. No. But during the time they were considered righteous, they were trying to take back Jerusalem, and they were going to murder an entire population. Is that righteous?
No, and I have a point about the Crusades that I'm going to get to later. But I don't want to go down that path of like righteousness or whatever. So, but in the context of this film and in real life, I think people rationalize tragedies as like, well, it's just a part of God's plan. But at a certain point, and I don't know if this is what I don't think the film was trying to purport this or not, but I think at a certain point, you have to ask yourself that, like, is this tragic? Like, I think people convinced themselves that it was a part of God's plan. Or, even if God does have a plan for everything, if you believe in God, then Satan also exists. So Satan, like anything at any moment, could be Satan, and not God. So it gets really complicated really quickly. But as far as the Crusades go, I did write that down. I think potentially in reference to Velocipastor, because it could be argued that what he's doing is a crusade by definition.
Yeah.
I think I didn't look up that word, but I'm pretty sure it means something along that. But as far as the Holy Crusades and like the Templar Knights, I feel like that's akin to what the Asian guy is doing. I just don't remember his name. What is it?
Asian guy, Wei Chan.
Wei Chan. Okay. Because he says he calls his people Templars, but he says Templar. He calls them Templar ninjas. So I feel like that was a direct. I mean, and I know Templar is just relating to God or whatever, but I feel like that was a direct reference to the Templar Knights of the Crusades. And so they're trying to forcibly turn people over, into Christianity, convert people.
Well, I mean that's what the Crusades were about.
Well, that's what
essentially.
I'm saying. So then,
Kyle might be mad at me for that. Sorry, Kyle.
So then Velocipastor takes all those guys out, which effectively means he's killing the Crusades. But then what he's doing himself is a crusade. So then that just goes back, I think, to what I was saying about this is both like the deconstruction and the reformation.
Or does it dismantle? Does it dismantle both? And says that neither are the right way. That there is okay.
Well, but Velocipastor wins, and he doesn't seem to have any consequences.
And so maybe this is another point of why it has to be the Catholic Church presented in this film. Is that so a huge thing that Martin Luther brings up with his theses and all of his arguments was that the relationship between man and God is a personal one, a private one, and that the church should not have any interaction between man and God. So let's say you're the church. Well, you shouldn't have any business in how I react with God necessarily. Like there are you shouldn't be like, hey God, you're stupid, but it's also not for you to interfere with. And so maybe that's what's being presented here is that, with this dismantling and reformation at the same time, it becomes an extremely individualized approach to the Christian religion. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So maybe that's one of the reasons it's a Catholic church.
I mean, yeah, I don't know enough about Catholicism to support that, but I definitely think that it was important, at least for the writer. Maybe he himself is Catholic. I don't know. I haven't looked him up. But I think that was an important part of this story for one reason or another. This is kind of deviating from that path a little bit, but it is something I want to talk about. I've tried to write down every time they mention the Bible verse or just the Bible in general, And I only noticed 3 times. Number one, it's the beginning with Job, which we already discussed.
Yeah.
But then in trying to convince Father Stewart that he should be able to go on this Velocipastor crusade, Doug quotes 2 Bible verses, which I looked up. The first one is, nothing is impossible where the Lord is concerned, which is Leviticus 24:24. And the second one is, and thine enemies shall be vanquished with righteous and swift justice, which he says is Matthew 32:6. If you look up these verses,
they do not exist.
They don't exist.
At
correct.
all.
So Leviticus 24 ends at verse 23.
23, right.
Yeah, so 24:24 does not exist. And then Matthew does not even have a chapter 32.
No. It was like 26?
Yeah, it stops in the 20s somewhere. So both of these verses, although sound like something I feel like I've heard in church before, are evidently not.
Well, so there is. So what did you just say? The impossible one?
Nothing is impossible where the Lord is concerned.
Well, so that's, I'm pretty sure it's Philippians.
It's like through God, all things are possible, something like that.
Yeah. I should know this. My mom's going to be mad at me.
Don't listen to this, Mom.
I'm pretty sure it's like Philippians 4:16 or something like that.
Bro,
I know that's one.
Never mind. I was going to say a joke that was potentially not cool. Oh. Dead Space. That's never good.
I don't know. But yeah, there's basically through God all things. Oh, wait. That's what I need to look up. Through God, all things are possible.
Our God is an awesome God. He reigns.
What did I say? Did I say Philippians 4:13 or did I say like 6:14?
I don't know.
Anyway, it is Philippians. I was right about that. 4:13. But yeah, it's all through God, all things are possible. Which is another interesting point because Father Stewart says, I forget what about, but he said, no, that's impossible. But if you're a Christian, then you would know Philippians.
Well, I think he's talking about him Doug turning into the Velocipastor.
It doesn't matter. I don't think that matters. What matters is the fact that Father Stewart said it's impossible when one of the most repeated Bible verses throughout the Christian religion, at least in modern times, specifically to young children so that it is hammered in their heads so they'll know it for the rest of their lives, is Philippians 4:13.
Which I think makes it interesting that they just make up a verse instead of using that one.
Yeah, it is. I'm interested into what the reason for that is.
It goes back to our discussion in Ghostbusters with that Bible verse.
Yep. You're absolutely right.
And authority.
And I was thinking about Father Stewart and the idea of authority the whole time. And I do not think that he deserves the authority.
Which, and then that's one thing that's interesting is, he says God has a plan or whatever. And then you can believe that if you want to. When I was like 6, our preacher said something like that, and I went up to the preacher afterwards and told him my interpretation of God's plan. And I don't remember what it was, but evidently it was really good because he brought me up in his sermon the next week. I wasn't there for that, but I was told that happened. But anyways, you can believe in God, God's plan is for everyone and everything has a reason and all that stuff. But what's interesting is in this film, Father Stewart is the one that pushes Doug to go east, to go to China.
No, to where God can't find you.
Right. And, it could be argued that, it was God's plan for Father Stewart to send him that way. But it's inarguable, I think, that if Father Stewart had not told him to go away, then he would not have gone to China and none of this would have happened.
Right. Well, this kind of happens in Job. Because Father Stewart's like, go to where God cannot find you. And if he finds you, then God or whatever.
Right.
Which kind of happens in Job. Kind of. I said so basically he loses everything and he has like boils and shit all over his skin. And he's like, God, what the heck? And God's like, bruh. And he's like, okay, I believe you. So Job, like Doug, is the farthest away from God that he can be, and yet he finds him. Although Doug doesn't actually find God, and God doesn't necessarily find Doug in China.
Right.
Now he finds something that brings him back to God.
Does he?
Does he? I think the answer is yes. I think the answer is yes because of what I was talking about, the individualism and the deconstruction of the Christian faith, but also that Reformation.
Right.
So it happens with the Catholic denomination, right? So Luther is like, hey, Lutheranism exists now. But also I think it happens
Hey, bro, you want to start your own church?
with the Bible in itself, with the second, I think it's the second, one of the Jerusalem councils, either the first or second, but I forget who it was. Now I feel stupid. I'm pretty sure it's Paul, or maybe, I don't know.
Paul used to be Saul, the blind guy, the one that was persecuting all the Christians, and then they were like, "Hey, bro, don't do that."
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
him.
it's
He's my
him.
favorite.
I think it's him. But he's like, hey, we don't got to get our dicks cut to be Christians. And all the Jews are like, yeah, you do. Gentiles can't be Christians. And Paul's like, bro, yeah, they can. And so there is that deconstruction of the faith there, but then the Reformation into something new.
Right.
So maybe this supposes that it's time for another change. Now that is very outlandish, not outlandish, but that's an out there interpretation.
Right.
But I think it's possible.
And it's interesting because then that proposes that the gospel is not gospel in the way that most people use that word.
Right.
Like I say this from time to time that most of the things that people do religiously don't have anything to do with religion. Because when you say you do something religiously, it means you do it all the time.
Right.
And obviously that stems from people used to go to church and stuff all the time. So like gospel, when you say something is gospel to you, it's like something that you really hold true to always and forever.
Yeah. No, forever and always.
Things change. But we talked about God and church and stuff a lot this episode so far. And I don't know how far we are into the episode or how close we are to the end because it's not over yet, guys. We're still in the middle of it. But one thing that I think is like the key theme, whichever word you want to use, I think both are applicable here, is a quote that Doug's dad says to him in the Uncle Ben car scene. He says, no, after that. He says, if you find yourself lost in the woods and you can't hear his voice, just follow your heart. Your heart will always lead you home. And that's important for a few reasons. Number one, well, the heart is the most important thing, but we're going to talk about that in a minute because you got to build up to the big stuff, right? What's most interesting initially is he says, if you ever find yourself lost in the woods, and I don't know if you watched this movie, you should have. I told you to. No, this movie.
Oh, Velocipastor.
But there's a lot of woods in this movie.
There are, and they're all China, except one.
Are they? I don't know. Only one actually says
Well, Carol is not China.
So, like, the first one is in China. And then I would say he's arguably literally lost in the woods at that point. The dad was speaking figuratively, we can assume. But
well, if we take a look at short screenplay writing, then sometimes internal meaning is externalized and manifested in order to heighten it and emphasize it.
I don't know why you said short screenplay writing. I think that's just screenwriting. But anyways, so the second time he's in the woods, or you could say forest, but woods, there's trees everywhere.
Forest.
The second time they're in the woods is when he kills the guy that's like, hey, give me your money! And then, there's that. And then there's a lot of fight scenes with ninjas in the woods at certain points. So, I mean, that's an intentional line, first of all. And it's just something that I thought was interesting that we kept going back into the woods. But then you have the heart thing, which is the dad says that, and that's cool or whatever. Follow your heart, man. That's good advice. But then later in the film, I think this is right after Velocipastor Doug has ripped out Father Reclamation's eye. And then he goes to, I almost said Nina. He goes to Carol, who does not work for HR. He goes to Carol, and then he's like, I don't know, man. I feel like I really just killed the Father Stewart, and I don't know how I'm going to do this. And then she's like, hey, I know you're good, and I know you won't hurt people. He's like, how do you know that? And she points at his heart, and she says, because of this. Because you're a good man, and you have a good heart. And so I think that's saying that, everything is really up to him. It's up to Doug. It's not up to... What are you doing over there?
Me?
Yeah.
I told you my car's making a weird noise, and I'm trying to get answers. I posted in a group chat, and nobody has said anything.
But so then it's Doug's heart, so that implies that it's Doug himself, which is the divine force and not necessarily God. But then at the same time, if you believe in God, then you believe God created everybody. So then God created Doug's heart. So then that argument cancels itself out. Kind of.
Well, I was going to take a different approach to that.
And if they really wanted to hammer it home, then they should have given Carol a heart transplant at the end of the movie with Doug. But they didn't. Also, that would kill Doug, probably.
I took a different approach to what you said with that. I was thinking more along the lines of our law discussion. I forget what episode. It might have been Daredevil. But that the law is based on a general sense of morality. And laws were created because of things that people believed were good, like it's bad to kill people, so let's have a law that says you're going to get arrested if you kill people, right?
Yeah.
And so then you don't even have to. And this is Kyle made this argument. So shout out to Kyle. He said that now I don't even have to think if it's good or bad, because if I believe that the law is just and moral, then the law says it's bad to kill someone, so I just say, oh, it's bad to kill someone because the law says so, and the law, better than I would say, is just. And so if one claims to be a Christian and is brought up with the Christian ideals and is brought up with what a Christian supposedly believes is good and bad, well, then in their heart, because of nurture, they will hold those Christian ideals even if they lose sight of God. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So even if God isn't present, he is always present because of who you are as a moral person and just person.
So are you saying that Doug is like that?
Potentially,
because I don't know that I would agree.
I'm not saying he is, but I'm saying that if I'm talking about the dad's quote.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I'm saying. Now, whether or not Doug is that person, I don't think he is, because he does struggle with, Ben Affleck struggled with.
So you're saying if you lose God, then and like internally, kind of, you should have God within you, and then if you follow that, then it'll lead you back to Him.
I'm saying if you follow God internally and what the ideals of Christianity are, then even if you lose sight of God, that you would still follow the Christian ideals because they have been nurtured into you, regardless of whether it's like a Christian ideal is don't kill people just to kill people, right?
Yeah.
Let's say I was raised up with that. Even if I turn atheist, or however you want to put it, I would still have that ideal, and therefore God would always reside in me if that is a Christian ideal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, but I'm pretty sure that flashback comes right before, or pretty soon before, he goes and does the dirty with
Carol,
yeah, which would imply to me that him remembering that line from his father told Doug that he should not be as beholden to what he thinks God wants him to do, and should just do what he himself thinks is right, which is not necessarily detracting from what you're saying.
No, and I agree with you. That's what I'm saying. I don't think Doug necessarily fits into that category. I'm just speaking along the lines of what his dad's quote was.
Right.
Because I don't think he does. I think he falls into the Daredevil category, where he is now struggling with the idea of, is he good or is he bad? Because, yeah, he did kill Frankie Mermaid, and Frankie Mermaid is a freaking murderer. So was it good that he killed him, even though it goes against God's will?
Right.
Supposedly God's will?
Yeah.
Because we don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible can say, don't kill people, but the Bible also said that it's okay to have slaves.
Right.
And then went back on that. So,
well, and then the way I've always viewed the Bible is God didn't write the Bible, because God can't write stuff in our plane.
It's divinely interpreted.
It's people's interpretation of the Word of God from however many years ago the Bible old is.
Well, and the Apocrypha also exists, which those books weren't divinely interpreted, yet for some time they existed within the Bible. And so there were teachings in the Apocrypha that were deemed as God's teachings, even though they weren't.
Yeah. I've never heard of that before. So.
The Apocrypha?
Yeah.
Well, that's what it is.
I was going to say about the Frankie Mermaid thing. He is the one that blew up the car. Oh, I said this in the recap. I forgot.
Yeah.
He's the one that blew up the parents' car.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, he's the one that kind of sets this whole story into motion. He's the one responsible for everything.
Right.
And so then, like you were saying, God's will or whatever, if all things happen for a reason and God has a plan for everybody, then I think the biggest problem with that belief is that it doesn't leave any room for deviation. So like you're like, so did that means that in the context of this film, if they believe that, then God willed, I keep wanting to say Frankie Trombone, for that God willed Frankie Mermaid to blow up Doug's parents' car, and then that led him to China or whatever, and that means that God willed that lady to get killed there, so that Doug could have the tooth.
Well, okay, so you're in a spiral right now. You got to.
I know, but I'm just saying. I'm going to stop at the next one. And then God willed Velocipastor to kill Frankie Mermaid, and then all of these things that are supposedly against the law, the biblical law, were all depend. If you believe that everything's part of God's plan, then that God willed everything, and then I think that's like the fundamental issue with this belief is that it doesn't leave any room.
This is where things get super, super messy.
Is that it doesn't leave any room for an individual's free will,
and this is where things get super messy. And then I think this we do not have time for this conversation. I mean, I would love to get into it because I do think it's very important, but I also think it's a question that can't be answered unless you break it down to personal philosophy. And this idea of predetermination is a huge thing for Calvinists, but that was immediately shut down. And I think that's what you're presenting as a super interesting argument, free will versus predetermination, fate. Because if everything is God's will, then free will doesn't exist. But yeah, I mean, you said it.
But ultimately, it doesn't matter if free will truly exists or not because we perceive that it exists. And so us, we think that it exists, and then that's good enough. But then if you start thinking about that, then you might lose your mind.
Well, the notion, the idea of freedom, in America, right? True freedom doesn't exist unless it's anarchy. And even in anarchy, there is ruling. So,
but what I said when I was 6, when I went up to the preacher that I mentioned earlier, was something along the lines of God has several paths, and maybe I was older than 6. I don't know. It was before I was in middle school. I know that for sure. God has several paths laid out, and he like knows how each of them will go, but then God doesn't know individually which one each person will choose. But then that itself is problematic because God's supposed to be all-knowing. But as I say, only a Sith deals in absolutes. So
there you go.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like the only way that conversation continues is if we go deeper down the rabbit hole, like Jake was saying. But I think that we've covered everything that's in my notes except for things like Doug is the big fat panda because he is the dragon warrior.
He is the dragon warrior. He is. Did I write anything funny down? I don't think so.
I wrote a few more things, but I
didn't even have time to think. I didn't even... Frankie Trombone is an homage to Frankie Mermaid, by the way.
Oh, okay.
So, I meant to tell Jared that in class, but I forgot to. I didn't even have time to think. I didn't even have
here's another thing.
To put my shoes on.
Which, I mean, this ties into what we said earlier. But so they're in the Dirty Bits montage. Everything that happened up into the movie before that point, like, flashes over them.
Yeah, which is super cool.
Which I wrote down, does this imply that the whole movie was leading towards it and, like, this was God's plan to get them two together? And so, like, I think that's a reading of the film. But then again, as given everything we just discussed, does that even matter?
Sex scene was the only sequence not storyboarded.
I wonder why.
Yeah.
He can't draw the naughty bits.
We could have afforded the car explosion. Cool.
Oh, that's another thing I wanted to talk about. What is our time? What are we at?
We're at like 103.
Okay, so
105.
I figured this would either be the longest episode thus far or the shortest episode thus far. So we'll see if we make it there. I'm not trying to cross that threshold, but if it happens, it happens. Anyways,
it's 110, right?
I don't think so. Anyways, I wanted to ask you what you thought the overall quality of this film, and it being quote unquote bad quality, adds to the meaning. Because most obviously, I think I said this in the recap, is when the car explodes, it just says, there's text on the screen that says VFX exploding car or something like that.
Yeah.
And that to me is hilarious. And then also later, the Velociraptor like costume does not look authentic at all. And then when he rips off Wei Chang's head or whatever his name is, it's clearly a mannequin head. And then he turns it around to face the camera, and it's got like sticky on.
It's bad. It's a mannequin head. It's not.
And it's so good. I love it. I love all.
I think this goes back to our Boss Baby episode. I think that it's set up this way to distract its audience from its meaning.
That's interesting.
And maybe not just distract, but it's meant for those who are worthy.
Well, because we or at least I think we argued, maybe we didn't argue. We at the very least had the discussion in our Dungeons and Dragons episode on what that film was intended to be. And I think that this film, Velocipastor, is very much 100% intended to be exactly what we got. And then I think that makes it a better movie for that. And so I think there is meaning in the quote unquote bad bits. But the Christianity angle was more important for me to discuss, so I didn't really
I agree.
read into that.
I agree, and but part of me does think it's as simple as it being intentionally low budget.
Bro, sorry, this episode's going to end up longer than the actual movie.
Oh yeah, it is. It is. We're 3 minutes away. We're already past credits.
Yes.
But yeah, I do think it's as simple as stylistically having it low budget to create some sort of deterrent away from the self-righteous people who are like, this is not good cinema. But if they took the time to watch it, they'd be like, holy shit, this film is amazing.
Well, that's like, it was funny watching it the first time. I was like, this is hilarious. This is amazing. And then this time I was like, oh my God, there's so much Bible stuff in here.
Well, look at the sex scene. The sex montage in this is absolutely.
They don't actually have sex either.
No, they don't. But I think that's part of the beauty of it.
It's like all the lead up.
There's like a level of innocence. So we know for a fact that Doug has not had intercourse.
Yeah,
and it would also seem that Carol has a lot.
Well, she's a hooker,
right? But there's this level of pure innocence that's presented in this montage that it transcends beyond a corporeal level of love, and it becomes ethereal, almost something more than what can be perceived, I think. But I think also when they first touch hands, it's very reminiscent of the creation of Adam.
Oh yes, I wrote that down.
Yes.
I didn't have more to say. I just remembered I wrote that down.
But yeah, like I did too, because as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, that is the creation of Adam. For those of you who don't know, there's a painting basically where
in the Sistine Chapel,
God is reaching out and Adam is reaching out, and they're barely touching, and that's the creation of Adam. But it's very reminiscent of this, and I think that it's safe to assume that that's what it's representing, just because of the Christian premise that's presented here.
Yeah, and then that I don't feel like we need to get into this now, but then that proposes to me the question of, in that scenario, who is God and who is Adam, and then, or does that represent kind of Doug falling from his Christian path?
Is it, or is it a level of like symbiosis?
I don't know. I think it could be read a multitude of ways.
And that's why this movie's so good.
So whoever you are, I forgot your name. I'm sorry that made this. I love you. You're a genius. You are invited to my inevitable wedding. That will never happen.
Shout out to Brendon Steere.
Nice.
I didn't even. Also, the guy who plays Ali and Alistair, his name is Voltaire.
Okay, so it is the same person
Yeah.
that plays them?
Yeah.
See, then that leads me to believe that maybe the war scene wasn't real. I meant to look that up, but I forgot. I don't know. There's a lot of layers to this, but I think we've talked your ears off long enough. So what happens at the end? Do we do blow-ups first and then
Yes,
tell
and
people?
guess what, Thomas?
There's an explosion in the world of this film. Even though we may not see it, his parents definitely blowed up.
No. Also, the Father Stewart's
oh, that's
gets
right.
blowed up.
Yeah.
So there's two.
All right.
I'm giving this a solid 4.
I was going to say 4.5.
Yo, dude, look at Carol.
Because they definitely get exploded up. But it's still not ready.
Okay, Avery, this is for you. Brendon Steere, while on set, is wearing a Neon Genesis Evangelion shirt. So that's for you.
Is it not pronounced Evangelion?
Evangelion. I always say it wrong. What did I say? What did I say?
I don't know, but in
Evangelion. That's what I said. Evangelion.
Evangelical. That's like God, right?
Evangelion. That's what it is.
So that's just anime God.
But also, yes, he's wearing an Evangelion shirt.
So many levels.
Standing next to Carol, who is wearing nothing but undies.
All right, so
hot.
Okay.
Goddamn.
Anyways,
bro, I would.
What do you? Hey,
Velocipastor if it meant I had to hang out with
what?
If you know what I'm saying.
Should they tell us in an email?
I want you. So number one recommendation is go to the email, which is pachinopodcast@gmail.com. But what I want you to tweet us on Twitter @pachinopod is tell us your favorite quote unquote bad movie that you actually really like. I do not consider Velocipastor a bad movie on an actual sense. Obviously, it's a quote-unquote bad movie on a superficial sense. So tell us what that is at Pachinopod on Twitter.
Also on Prime and probably Tubi and other places.
And Vudu.
There's a movie called Llamageddon. I haven't watched. That's on my list. There's a movie called Killer Sofa, which is not good, I don't think.
But it's definitely worth a watch.
It's interesting. And then, there's something there's like Bobby's Butt or something like that.
Ginger Dead Man?
No, it had butt in the title. I don't remember. That also recently made it on my list. Llamageddon's been there a while. So there's a lot of these kind of movies. If you watch Velocipastor and you liked it, there's a lot of things of this nature on Prime, probably Tubi and those other places as well. So check them out if you got the money. If you don't got the money, just, do it the old-fashioned way. But yeah, I think that's it. God is dead and we killed him.
Ooh, stout and sauerkraut.
Stout and sauerkraut.
God's plan. I hold back sometimes I won't. Yeah, feel good sometimes I don't. Hey, don't. I finesse down west.
Did you look up the lyrics?
Hey,
oh my
nest
God.
my